living well, being happy, being healthy, being able to do what they want to do or have the ability to do what they want to do. I think, just healthy, happy people that are doing what they want.
In a nutshell, I would say that what we believe we know from all the other from the literature and other villages is that the existence of a village can have a positive impact on people's lives and their health and well-being. If we can bring together communities with villages so that there's sharing of ideas and so forth, it can help us accomplish that mission faster and better.
The goal is that they thrive, and what helps them to thrive is through any volunteer things that they do, the services that they receive, and belonging to a community, a true community. So thriving in community is what villages are all about.
Living well. So living well in community, and we did go back and forth whether that was thrive in place or just in community, but I think the idea of being in community connotes being connected with other people and having that whole, people not isolated, that they're relating to people in their community and living well.
I think that's how I see UPLIFT, is that the desire of people to age in their own community and to age well with independence. And we like to talk about all of us being interdependent, because we always have been and always will be. And yes, it does take a village to raise a family, and I think it takes a village to age.
To Deborah's credit, she knew you don't arrive with the answer. You arrive with a process of discovery. So there was a lot of discovery about, okay, what is it that we're talking about? And I give her immense credit, because as she was talking to the people who were interested in a village, she was already, as she should have been, but she was on it. How would this ever be sustainable? You create one, that's nice, but is it sustainable? And that's where she started the conversation from the very beginning about if we did this, how would it keep going? What's the financial model? What could happen? So she brought that expertise from SNAC, from Age Friendly, over into what was then called Sarasota Villages.
Villages have a very specific model, which almost everybody follows. And if every village needs to create its own 501c3, do everything, its own little itty bitty self. So they need to be reimagined, because so many of them are little itty bitty organizations that are volunteer driven, volunteer run. And best model is a model that we've developed with UPLIFT, that is a hub organization that can help support multiple villages and streamline and maximize the benefit of all the resources.
Out of the book circles, it was like, well, what would we like to do? Is there something we'd want to do in our community, whatever? And she had been part of the DuPont Circle Village up in Washington, D.C. area. And she spoke about it, and we all said, well, that sounds like a great idea. And Deborah and Mary and Brenda, because Brenda is a friend of Mary's, started talking, and then Deborah got Sue Berger involved.
So from the beginning, it was Mary Haber, myself, Deborah, and Brenda. So it was the four of us initially. I know Mary Haber was really involved because she's part of a village up in Washington. And so we started with just the idea of a Sarasota village, and, it just kept on growing to what it is now.
This concept seemed to me a very, very useful and important complement to existing services, and a lot more is needed for older adults. That's one. Another is because I love the idea of a village, and I wanted one in Sarasota for me. And also, you know, I love to do things that I'm passionate about. And I thought this was such a good idea. I became passionate about it from the beginning. And I was hopeful that Deborah might support the idea of this being one of my TPF bodies of work, because it seemed like it fit to me. It seemed like it would be possible that she would support TPF supporting it. So, you know, I'm a TPFer, and what we do is we connect and we learn and we share. And so if there are other villages in Florida, I wanted to know who they were, because I had been involved with Age Friendly Sarasota, and I'd been involved in long-term care things before. So I understood something about the aging ecosystem. It was obvious to me because I did a mammoth amount of research on villages all on my own, just calling people, organizations, whatever, and having conversations about how to better do this than the way villages were being created before. So it was clear to me that I needed to call it the individual villages, and so I did. And I had an interview just like we're having right now, sort of. And I asked them all, would you be interested in having a conversation together? I had no, like, you know, there was no statewide entity in my mind back then, but I wanted to talk to all of them. And then they all seemed to want to connect with one another. And so we did. There was a little hesitancy, like, what are we really going to do once a month? But we did. We were talking about what their issues were, you know, so issues with the policies in Florida, and that was a hot button for all of them. So we kind of uncovered what the needs were that the villages were having in terms of maybe working together more, and maybe it provided some of the underpinning for an idea like UPLIFT. In fact, it did, from the point of view of, you know, having a stronger voice in the state of Florida. Like, we could have a voice in Florida, but a statewide organization might, you know, could. We talked about overextending beyond the village's mission. After 6 months, I said, I'm not going to do this anymore. This is not for me to be doing. And who wants to do it next? And so then Annette said she would take it over. So she did for another 6 months or something like that. So one of the things that I brought up relatively early was that there was something to be addressed, because TPF's service area is a 4-county area. And, you know, it was very clear already. We had already discovered that every village has to duplicate what every other village is doing. So Deborah brought in the concept of the 4-county area. And by then there was enough work that we'd done that made it clear that having a hub concept would make sense. So it evolved from Sarasota Village to Suncoast Villages, because we were getting that we were in this duplication mode. Like, we were in a model, this model of little itty bitty Sarasota Village. There are villages that are needed all over this county and this region. And then we moved to, because of the reasons that I told you, to Suncoast Villages, in part TPF, in part because we saw the need for a hub type of support that would help expedite and help us move forward.
We went from a Sarasota village to a Suncoast village. We started to hear people being interested in the other counties. And then we started hearing from Barbara Shear, and then Deborah came across the other villages in Florida that had come into being, and started convening them as a group. And then not too far along down the line, they expressed an interest in being part of something bigger. And so we talked about just being a statewide network that we could bring everybody together.
So the sustainability model was that to create UPLIFT that would support the creation of villages, but then the villages would also invest in the overall movement.
I feel like people need to understand UPLIFT's value proposition, and we're getting better at telling that story. But as a hub of current and future villages, UPLIFT really is the vehicle in which villages can help villages. And it's a model that's can sustainably scale the village model across the state and create strategic partnerships at a level that an individual village would have a really hard time doing.
UPLIFT is the umbrella organization that promotes establishing villages and will eventually provide services to villages. One might say backroom services, backroom processing services, purchasing services, products, etc. And that's where UPLIFT comes in and can service them. It also will connect the various villages, and that can help with cross pollination of ideas and allow the villages to connect with each other, which promotes better communication and the better process of kicking ideas around, for a better term. And that helps people promote their own villages.
So it's not a village, it's not going to be a village. It's a hub and spoke model of villages, which the traditional of that is that we would have UPLIFT as an infrastructure. And the other villages wouldn't have to become 501c3s, and they would be part of UPLIFT, and UPLIFT would do all the infrastructure things. I'm not sure that's exactly where we're going to end up, at least not for all villages, because we have existing villages, we have new ones that are developing and getting their own 501c3 because we weren't ready yet. So the possibility of these others, let's say there are some people that are developing hub and spoke for a county. Right. So how would they be involved with UPLIFT? Well, hub and spokes, other hub and spokes that are local could be part of members of UPLIFT. Or, we have to figure all that out, but there could be some services that they get also from UPLIFT. There's so many possibilities, in the future.
The goal of UPLIFT is to provide an opportunity for villages that do exist, or villages that come online in the future, an opportunity for them to make best use of their resources by providing a number of administrative services that would be more costly if they tried to provide them independently. It's really wanting to be an administrative services organization for villages. What we can do well as a hub is bring people together and use our connections to support the creation of villages. That's what it ought to be about. That's the fundamental thing. And bring together the idea of we want to make it work where villages are helping villages. So we're exchanging information, we're exchanging best practices, become kind of an information resource.
We could be, like I said before, the voice for Florida villages and help them become an important part of the aging landscape in Florida. The services that are offered by villages are provided by volunteers and don't duplicate the services provided by the current aging network. The villages and current aging network service providers can be strategic partners, referring older adults to each other's organizations and supporting each other in our efforts to improve the quality of life of older adults in our state. So a lot of it is people who are not getting some aging network services, let's say like help at home care or whatever, but some might be. But it's not duplicating the existing aging network. It kind of fills a gap of the kind of earlier services only provided by volunteers, even though we refer people to professional services. But it's a volunteer run or driven model and a member driven model.
I believe this model promotes the sustainability of villages and it enhances the potential for synergistic collaborations. And in talking to villages around the country, I had this sense that some of them wanted to take a network of independent or create a network of independent villages that already exists. And that's a much different and higher hurdle I believe, than creating villages from start and as part of a hub and spoke. When I was doing the consulting project for the National V2V, National Village to Village Network, I was talking to villages all around the country, and those conversations led me to be more and more convinced that UPLIFT's vision to create a network of villages using this hub and spoke model really is the right vision.